So, it's Tyler. Our new friend Conway had some questions which I was really surprised that I have been lacking in answering on my channel, but it is a fairly young channel. I'm not even like 2 years old yet, I don't think. So, let's see if we can answer some of these questions, specifically about Pathfinder. This will have a little bit on the role-playing game philosophy, but not really, because this is assuming you're already kind of in line with the 3D 4D space of things, or at least in wanting to play a game like Pathfinder without having a 4 hour long combat that doesn't really accomplish anything because you're constantly looking up the rules, having out of character talk, that sort of thing. You know. So Conway says, I hear you're the Pathfinder guy here in this community. I suppose so. Have you had much success in applying the 3D and 4D notions to Pathfinder? So, as far as the 4D notions, I think there are aspects of 4D, which is in a nutshell, co-creation. Right, the players can, within the limitations of the tone and setting, add their own things to a scene that the GM didn't describe. And I have examples of that happening. For example, the player characters were, in a game I was GMing, were traveling on a boat for about a week. It was like 5 days or something. And I look where they're traveling. They're traveling very well-traveled riverways that are commonly fished and traded on. And I was just thinking, like, no, they're actively trying to achieve something, and there's going to be something difficult at the end when they disembark. There would be no purpose into slowing that down just to have combat for whatever reason. You could have something interesting, but this is a 5 year long campaign almost at this point. It would be kind of absurd to stretch it out even further at this point. Though it could obviously be interesting if you had a ship break down and then have like a shipwreck and exigently we change how things go. That's a call that I made as a GM then and there. Well, one of the players, because it was just sort of uneventful sailing, and I was ready to, fast travel and just say something like, the next few days of sailing pass uneventfully as the countryside slowly changes from grassland to thick, soggy marsh, and, etc. Go on. And then we're at our final destination. But one of the players goes, oh, I kind of, her character, speaking on the third person, which I don't think is a problem for this thing. But, she says Maria, walking aboard deck, bumps into a couple of our crewmates playing chess, knocks over some of the pieces, and she starts an altercation. I never mentioned anybody playing chess. I never even mentioned that the ship is obviously, it's a Viking-style long ship that's, it's going to be rocking back and forth even on a fairly steady river. And that was so cool. We just added out of nowhere, and it didn't break the game, right? She wasn't using this as a, like, I find a gun, and then I start, she wasn't using it to win the game. And that's the important thing with 4D, no matter what system you're using it for. She used it to make something interesting happen. And it said something about the character. She's a little bit of a trickster. She's an agitator. She likes starting shit. She's a monk. She's a character, almost a bit of an ex-monk. Her monastery turned out to be a cult, and now she's disillusioned with the life. And she uses her brawling skills to to get into or start fights. So yeah, that's a really interesting way to do the 4D thing that I think is system agnostic, right? The other ways that you can use 4D are things like I look around for X, right? I look around to see if there's an armory, if you're in a town. Maybe there wasn't an armory beforehand, but it's a town of 500 people. It would make sense for there to be an armory. And you'd argue whether or not that's 3D or 4D, whether that's because the GM is approving the co-creation when it's framed like that. But yeah, as far as 3D, and the important thing here, you need to be able to frame your actions with as few mechanics as possible, right? A pet peeve of mine is whenever somebody casts a spell and they read out the full description of the spell ad nauseum, and you're just going like, just tell me what the spell does. Just tell me what your character is doing and what I need to roll, and then what happens, right? So frame it as, for example, in a game I'm playing in, the DM, my good friend Hunter, has required, because running Pathfinder not in Galarian, but in his own setting, and he's a creative writing, I was going to say major, he's in graduate school, so he has a degree in creative writing, so he's created a really interesting setting, and was very adamant, which is great, that the way magic works is you need to role play it out. If you don't go through the ritual of casting a spell, the spell will still go off, but at great cost to you. And I thought that's a great way to do it, you know. And the third or fourth time you do it, you're getting kind of comfortable with casting the spells. And so, you know, the third, fourth time you cast Magic Missile, maybe, okay, we don't need to hear about the hand gestures. And I was just reminded of something here. The game tells you implicitly how to roleplay these things. If you have Magic Missile and it has the somatic component, the verbal component, well, now you fill in the gaps, right? Somatic component, what's that? I make a few quick arcane gestures before flinging my hand forward, and a bolt of brilliant arcane energy springs forth. And I don't need to roll for it, it always hits, right? So it strikes true, and the dart lands in the monster's chest. Ding, roll damage. He takes 8 damage. You know, maybe we're rolling, 3d4 or whatever. And the only mechanical thing I had to say there was he takes 8 damage. 8 force damage, if you want to add specifically what kind of damage for whatever purpose. But most of us know that Magic Missile does force damage. If you were brand new, that may be an example of a thing where if you forget to say what kind of damage it does, it's an example of, like running crunchy systems in the old video. Doesn't really matter. So little is resistant to force damage anyways. It's usually not going to be the make or break difference if you forget that the specific kind of damage it does. Crispy brings up a good point, which is that it can become difficult to play Pathfinder and similar games without mentioning what kind of action you're taking. And I think this is especially true of Pathfinder 2nd edition, but in Pathfinder 1st edition, it is almost with a 99.9%. I would have to think really hard of a spell that took a full round action. I think there's some, but almost every single time, I know you didn't have to say, I use a standard action to then do your description of Magic Missile. You just do the description of Magic Missile, and I know there's your standard action. You now have a move action left. I'm not going to remind you of that. You know, so you take your move action, you covering my set. Maybe you do them together and it makes it even faster and more organic, and you have a moving picture going on while I dart, 30 feet to cover. There's mechanical language, sure, when, you move 30 feet, but it's also a real world distance, so it doesn't really sound that mechanical, even if maybe a book wouldn't be written that way, right, with these exact distances. But it doesn't break the immersion, it doesn't break the reality of the picture for me at all. I dart 30 feet into cover, or I draw, unsling my pack and start fiddling around first. There's another move action. It's one of the reasons I like the term standard action, which is kind of figure out it's the bulk of your turn. It's the most lengthy part of your turn other than a full round action, of which there aren't that many. Then a move action is almost everything that involves moving. You You can do it while you're doing another standard action, or you can do it with another move action. And you can say things like, I dash 60 feet. Oh, okay, you're using your whole turn to do that. I sprint 90 feet. Oh, okay, he's got a heavy load, so he only moves 90 feet. And this is all involved on player trust, right? Knowing that they've got their character sheet. I've got my character sheet open, and I've said all of this without having to look at, like, literally any of it. There's things like where it's like, this is a supernatural ability, this is an extraordinary ability, this is a spell-like ability. That stuff mattered more in 3.5, and it could get kind of messy because this guy's got like a special immunity to but that just doesn't happen as often in Pathfinder. They're kind of just flavorful things. Like an extraordinary ability is something that a mundane human being could just do, like the advice ability from Sensei Monk that my character has. Anybody could give advice and give a morale bonus on attacks. It's a reflavoring of bardic performance, but you're a monk. So instead of, having a rousing instrumentation, maybe giving, calls with a trumpet to signal people to what's going on the battlefield, you're giving active advice, pointing out, hey, your left side's open, cover that up, tighten up here. Oh, that was a good hit, but, just keep doing that, keep pounding him there, and he'll quit if I don't trip over my words. That sort of thing. So that some of this may sound like it requires a ton of system mastery, and of course I'm biased because this is a game I've played for over 10 years, but really it's not that complicated. And when you do need to look up, I use spells because it's probably the most complicated example that I could give. There's like, I want to say thousands of spells, if not, close to 2,000. But something that you can do really quickly with this is, your character is impossibly intelligent, has a book that's got all these things open. You can flavor it as the character is recalling this stuff as you're opening, I know we say don't open the book, but there are many, many spreadsheets and you could print out your own spell cards of just the spells that you use. And whenever you have downtime, you go to sleep and you prepare your spells. Don't look at the huge, giant list. Narrow it down before sessions. That way you're not going, oh, geez, dude, I'm trying to decide between spell number 112 and spell number 113, and 50 of them all do damage. So it's, that part, there is some system mastery involved there. But, narrow things down, know what your character can do, trust that your players aren't trying to cheat, and you can kind of tell when a turn has gone on just for too long, that, okay, something might be suspect here. But unless it's happening like every single turn, it shouldn't be a huge issue. As far as skills, I think the skills are easily 3D'able, and they're what you end up rolling most often, right? Things like stealth, needing you to, okay, you must have cover in order to stealth. These are just sanity checks, right? If you try to sneak and you're not ending in cover and you're just kind of crouched down in the middle of nowhere, well, it's not a video game, right? Feats, let's see, like a feat, like, I have an active feat. Okay, I was trying to figure out if I had an active feat. Stunning Fist, you can word this like, I think Stunning Fist is a great one. After an attack comes in, you describe your defense. Now it's your turn coming up. I slip that punch and line up a punch right on his temple, trying to knock him out. And the GM might be confused as to whether or not that's the Brawler Knockout Punch ability or the Monk Stunning Fist ability. But that would mean you're like a very rare, weird multi-class, Brawler Monk, and your DM would probably already know that. But the DC is a Fortitude save in both of these cases. I'm sure there's edge cases where something weird's happening here. And here, is the second time in this video where you need to make a mechanical thing where you need to say Fortitude save, DC 17. That's it. To me, that's acceptable. Especially given the general quality of playtime to mechanical chatter that doesn't advance the game. That is an okay thing to mention for me. And then DM says, boop, 15. Don't even need to say 15. Just say, describe what happens. Again, oh, the guy's stunned. So he drops his weapons. He goes limp. And he's, kind of dazed, backing off. Again, the different descriptors, too. Dazed. He's blinded. He's deafened. He's stunned. They tell you what the mechanic is, and they also tell you what's flavorfully happening to the character. So, I find that it's a system that requires you to have a baseline level of mastery to play, but it's quite a bit more important for the GM to know what's going on. But also, you can... there's some stuff that you can hand wave in the moment, learn later. It's not important that every nook and cranny of the game. Narrow down what you're looking at because it is such a huge game. Sorry if you're hearing my dog snore in the background. Yeah, hopefully that helps. A little bit of a longer video. It wasn't really guided. I literally just pulled up the character I play on my friend's Every Other Wednesday game to see how often do I need to look at this to take a couple of actions here. And the answer is I needed to look at it twice. I'm a huge proponent of using... This is the last thing, and it's very important, actually, now that I think about it. I'm a huge proponent of using something like Pathfinder Easy Sheet, or Pathfinder Auto Sheet, sorry, for a lot of the stuff, because it just automatically does stuff for you, right? I can just check power attack on and off, and it automatically does the math for me. Power attack is something that's used so consistently. There's the joke ABP, always be power attacking, it becomes almost the inverse becomes true, where you're specifying that you're hunting for gaps where you're not power attacking, right? So at a certain point, it becomes kind of like the magic missile thing, where it's like, just describe what your attack looks like. I don't need you to go into the grotesque detail as far as that goes. Deadly aim, rapid shot, you just tick all of these things on, it changes the number, and you just describe how you're attacking the guy, what the number you rolled is. How big the number is tells us the results, and the results will speak for themselves. Well, they won't speak for themselves. Either the player or the GM will describe the results, but, that will be heavily informed by whether or not the number is 15 or a 42. Right? And that's part of why I love Pathfinder so much, is you get these big numbers that really viscerally tell you, when somebody's been outclassed, when somebody has absolutely horrifically failed at something, when somebody is just riddled with arrows. Yeah, there's problems with the game, but those are some of the things I do. I'll put a link in the description to the auto sheet that I use, but there's a few. So yeah, let me know you guys' thoughts, or if you have any more questions. I can't have covered everything in 20 minutes. Sorry. Thanks. See ya.